welcome everybody. If you're watching live, as always, please feel free to ask any questions along the way. If you think you might like to come on the show yourself, please do get in contact. My details on the channel's About page. Next week, we'll be talking with Matt Campbell, but today is Ryan Castellucci. Hello, Ryan.
Hi.
How are you doing?
I'm doing great.
Fantastic. Could you introduce yourself quickly? Just sort of tell us who you are and what you get up to.
My name is Ryan, and I'm a hacker.
Very good.
I have been a hacker for a very long time. I got my career-wise, I got started as a teenage sysadmin in an ISP.
Okay.
Then I moved on to be a sysadmin at a real company, and then I pivoted into security, and that is where I have been since.
Okay, sounds good.
And we can dig into that a bit more.
Yeah, we'd love to. So are you happy to sort of start at the beginning of your computer interests, or where did it all start for you?
In the beginning, there was the command line.
Straight to the command line.
There's actually a book by that title by the guy who wrote Snow Crash.
Okay.
Which I'm not going to talk about. My first computer was a Compaq Portable 2 running some version of MS-DOS.
Okay.
If you've never seen one, it is basically a suitcase computer. So it's got dual floppy drives on the right-hand side, and then there's a small green, or I think there was an amber version if you wanted to spend even more, CRT, and then there was a keyboard that kind of fit in as a cover for the floppy drives and the monitor that could be detached.
Okay.
And it had a handle so that you could carry it around.
I've actually got a picture of it there. There you go.
That is a Compaq Portable 2, yes. So that got brought home by my dad on weekends from work, and I played a lot of educational games and just kind of explored how the computer worked. I was really, really little at that point. I think I was maybe only 2 or 3 years old.
Oh wow! Okay.
So yeah,
That's early.
I did in fact learn to type before I learned to write, and whether I can in fact write is debatable.
Okay.
I even started getting RSI in my 20s, but
Was that from writing?
From typing. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Too much time on a computer. It got better once I found a keyboard that was comfortable.
Okay.
So I learned BASIC when I was 6 or 7, starting with QBasic.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody got me a copy of Visual Basic, which may or may not have been pirated. I don't know. But that was fun. I also got interested in cryptography around that time.
Okay.
I think oh my goodness, I hadn't been thinking about it, but it was a children's book on ciphers and codes that talked about like classic ciphers, like simple substitution ciphers, and things like the Pigpen cipher, and how to crack them by hand.
Okay.
Using things like bigram analysis, letter frequency, that sort of stuff.
And what kind of age was this now? Presumably not 2 and 3.
No, that
was a little bit
was
older by now.
It's like 7 or 8.
Okay. Yeah.
I just was a very, very nerdy child.
Wow.
I actually remember making solvers for I think crypto quotes was what they were called, where they would do a simple substitution cipher for a medium length quote, and you'd have to crack it.
Okay.
So I wrote a solver for that, which is kind of a tactic I like for games. Like, yeah, I could play the actual game or I could just write a program that solves it, and that's more fun for me. um,
So I guess that the crypto stuff that you were doing back then is kind of hooked you, and you stuck with it throughout. Is that something that?
yeah, yeah. I got interested in, I guess, hacker stuff in general. Malware in particular was
Okay.
just something that sparked my curiosity. Like, why would people do this? I ended up, there's like some school assignments, like write a report on anything you want, and so like I scoured the library for for books on hacker stuff. I got Stephen Levy's Hackers Heroes of the Computer Revolution,
Hmm.
um, which which at that age was a sense of the word hacker that I was not familiar with, but of course that's what I am.
Hmm.
Um, there were a lot of things in that book that stuck with me. The I think one of the big ones though is it talks a bit about hacker aesthetic,
Hmm.
and one of the points that it makes is you can create art and beauty on a computer, and I I do feel that some of my projects and code ends up being artistic expression. I don't know if you saw it a while back. I made a ANSI terminal version of the portrait of my face I have as my avatar, the pixel art
Hmm.
on Twitter, and I figured out how to stuff it in a Git commit in the email header, so that when you viewed the commit log, you would get my face in a terminal.
I think I do remember
And
that one. Yeah.
and people comment things like, "This is awesome, and I want it fixed immediately." And that's really art. Like, that's making
Yeah.
somebody feel something in a
Okay.
very real way. Um, there was also the Fat32 fragmenter that I wrote. I think that ended up on Hacker News.
Oh no. That sounds like a terrible
uh,
idea.
yeah, I can't remember if it was that one or like when I wrote some code that would let me put snarky messages in my TLS certificates.
Okay.
Um, One of those two, somebody like said something along the lines of like, "Oh, like empty comments are against the rules, but I can't hear your rules over the sound of how awesome this is." Um, oh my goodness, I have very much tangented.
That's okay.
Um,
No, no, go for it.
yeah, so I wrote the report. As I got older, I
So this was the report on malware, and that was a school
yeah,
project,
that
sort of
was a school project.
high school or something. I
No,
presume. Okay.
no, this was grammar school, you would call it here.
Before high school, is that give us an age range? Maybe that would help.
Like like 8 to 10.
Okay, very good.
Yeah.
Did you get some funny looks for the subject of your report, and
I have
how did
absolutely
it?
no recollection whatsoever.
Okay.
um, None. Um, right. I got into when I got a bit older and had internet access more readily available. I
Mhm.
like discovered hex editors and started reverse engineering save game files for video games.
Okay.
And I remember giving myself absurd amount of money in SimCity 2000 in
Oh
particular.
yeah.
Um,
So was this sort of building on other people's reverse engineering efforts, or was it something that you sat down to figure out
I
yourself?
didn't
And
know what to look for.
yeah,
I just opened up a hex editor and figured stuff out.
okay, that's awesome.
Yeah, yeah, I had no idea what I was looking at.
Mhm.
I particularly remember being really confused by little endian storage of numbers.
Okay.
Like, why would you reverse the order of the bytes? That's how Intel does it, it turns out.
Hey.
Which I did not learn until years later.
Right.
Um, right, text files. Like, so I read a bunch of old hacking stuff, like about phreaking and um, old issues of frack, smashing the stack for fun and profit, which of course led to playing hacking challenge sites.
Okay.
I think the first one I played was called Zeppelin, which was hosted by CyberArmy. I don't even know if they're still around. That one actually had a chatbot challenge where you were supposed to social engineer the chatbot. But it was really fickle, and like
Okay.
I just got stuck on it for a long time. But I moved on to other things. I think it was io.smash the stack I played around with a little bit. I spent a lot of time on this one site called HackQuest, which was very potpourri in terms of the challenges. It had everything from steganography to cryptography to um, web challenges, forensics, more typical binary reversing. Was never good at the binary reversing. I'm still not good at it, but fortunately, I don't need to be.
Yeah.
Um, oh my goodness, I think I ended up finishing like 90% of the challenges on that site. I was in high school by this time.
Right. Okay.
Um,
Was this sort of free time, entertain yourself type effort, or is it
this was when I should have been when I was supposed to be doing homework.
okay. Right. Don't.
Um,
Maybe. Maybe
well,
not.
I have a career in it, so
Okay.
it's not the worst. Yeah, I also got involved. Oh my goodness, I was very fortunate that my high school was associated with a major university, and so they had a lot of resources because of that, including a network engineer occupational training
Okay.
program, which was 2 years.
Hmm.
That was I think it was Cisco curriculum.
Okay.
And I took that and I learned how computer networks work,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
that has also very very strongly affected me. I got involved in a Linux users group.
Mhm.
I think I started going that when I was 16.
Okay.
um, um,
So
ended
with
up
all of
falling.
these sort of things that you were accumulating almost throughout your childhood, they kind
Yeah,
of formed you into this person that likes reverse engineering, breaking things maybe for the better, that kind of thing, for
building
entertainment,
things too.
building. Okay. Um,
Yeah, so after some time in the Linux users group, I finished high school.
okay.
I didn't really feel like going to university at that point, and I decided that I was going to work at an internet service provider.
Okay. So many
Um,
people from America have worked in an ISP of my guests. It's like everyone keeps talking about how they used to work at an ISP, and I'm just sitting there going, "Aw."
I think that it was quite an accessible job
Okay.
for people of a certain age.
Right.
Back when, you know, there might be a local ISP or two in even a medium-sized town.
Right. Okay.
So that place was kind of interesting. I started working there, I guess, 2002.
Right.
Um, and they did dial-up. Um, I got hired to do help desk
Okay.
because, like, oh my goodness, like nobody nobody in their right mind would hire hire a 17-year-old to do more than help desk.
Hmm.
But then the sysadmin quit.
Right.
And I'm like, I can do it.
Upgraded.
And um, the guy who ran the place was extraordinarily cheap, and I could, in fact, do it. And so
Okay.
he got probably the cheapest sysadmin ever.
Hmm.
Um, and I learned a lot and just like made lots of mistakes that probably would have gotten me fired if I had been making any sort of real money.
Right. Okay.
Um, but I think my biggest regret is I stayed there too long.
Hmm.
But the interesting thing is um, they were doing Wi-Fi, managed Wi-Fi installations at apartment complexes, and as I said, the guy who ran the place was rather cheap and pretty sleazy. So what he was doing was getting like consumer grade Wi-Fi gear and getting a broadband connection, consumer grade broadband connection
Hmm.
into the building and just splitting it out via Wi-Fi. And um, early 2000s, like there was lots of file sharing. Like you put a bunch of, and it was a college town, so you put a bunch of students on this stuff, and it just so like again, I'm like, well, like okay, let's get some cheap Linux computers and build routers,
Hmm.
and I can figure out how traffic management works, and I did. And I figured out how to load balance multiple broadband connections.
Okay.
And I ended up, for a while, we switched to Cisco access points for a while, but again, cheap. So, oh my goodness, I did so many sketchy things there. I think I got talked into writing a crack for MikroTik's time limited demo
Oh wow. Okay.
of Router OS,
All right.
and we were running that on um, x86 system on chips. Socris, if anybody's heard of that.
Okay.
So that was, I think, yeah, I tried for a while. I tried at one point to like build custom stuff for the WRT54G
Hmm.
series of routers back before there were any other versions of it. It was just that,
Yeah.
which was one of the earliest consumer grade things that ran Linux that you could just load custom firmware on.
Hmm.
And DDWRT, I think was the first one, but there have been many since.
Yeah.
Um, but that wasn't really powerful enough. Ended up getting, I parted out. We do a Soakers board, a 200 milliwatt PCMCIA Prism 2.5 radio,
Hmm.
external antennas, stick them in electrical junction boxes.
So can you
All
paint us a picture of what the building looked like? Was this like the internet came in at one point and then you
we'd
relayed
run we'd run
things?
Ethernet cables
Okay.
throughout the exterior. In some cases, we did wireless bridging at 5 gigahertz with
Right.
panel antennas. The exterior boxes would have, I think we usually put 5 dB external omnis on them.
Hmm.
So they're like, about this tall.
Okay.
Um,
And that then covered this apartment complex which needed internet access and then you
yeah,
provided.
yeah. So there were a lot of seasonal residents.
Okay.
So and then all of the local broadband providers required year-long contracts at
I
minimum.
see. Okay. Okay.
So the business plan was that seasonal service could be offered.
Right.
Um, And since it was just reselling the consumer grade connections, it was really cheap.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, then oh, so many dumb things there. At one point, the guy got the idea of putting the computers that we were running on site inside of a chest freezer.
Right. To keep them
That
cool
one,
or for security?
it's just as a way to lock them up.
Yeah, okay.
But I think he killed the Freon line when trying to mount a lock on it.
Oh no.
And they're great insulators, and computers do in fact put out a fair amount of heat.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the computer just fried itself.
Yeah.
It went wrong so quickly. It was kind of glorious.
That sounds
Oh,
incredibly sort of Heath Robinson almost, where you just sort of string it all up and make it work, and fingers crossed it stays going.
oh yeah, spit and baling wires the whole way
Yeah,
because that was all there was budget for.
yeah. So what happened after that job then? Where did you go?
Um,
What did you do?
I moved to Silicon Valley with someone who's long since my ex,
Okay.
and started up in the States. It's called community college. They
Hmm.
they have a 2 year degree. They'll have a 2 year degree program, but it's very, very cheap, and it generally transfers to a more traditional university.
Okay.
So my plan was to get like the basics out of the way there on the cheap, and then I was going to transfer into University of California, Berkeley,
Okay.
which has a great computer engineering program. Um, and well, that didn't really work out.
Oh.
I ended up getting recruited. Like somebody picked me up on OkCupid and invited me to a board game night at um, at her house with her and her husband and a bunch of their friends. And they heard that I did sysadmin stuff, and I basically got browbeat into putting in an application to work as a Unix sysadmin at the company this guy was working at.
Okay.
Um, and I got an offer, and it was quite a lot of money to me at the
Hmm.
time, and school was kind of boring,
Right.
so I decided to go do that.
Okay.
Um,
And
so
so
I
if I said, was that sort of normal sysadmin inverted commas? Was that
oh,
sort of a
sorry.
fairly straightforward sysadmin type job?
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
straightforward. I mean,
Okay.
the only thing not straightforward about it was that it was at a startup
Okay.
in Silicon Valley
Right.
circa 2009.
Okay.
Um, so that was just kind of a weird culture,
Hmm.
but it was fine. I was in my early 20s.
Right.
Like, I could work hard and play hard. Too old for that shit now.
Oh.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. There were, I think it was about 200 people when I started there.
Okay.
Um, they didn't have any dedicated security people at the time I started, but oh, I missed something. 2007.
Right. Rolling back a bit.
Yeah. So one, I ended up going to DEF CON, I think 2004.
Right.
Somebody from the Linux users group's like, "Hey Ryan, come to DEF CON with us. It'll be
Okay.
fun."
Nice.
It was fucking 19 in Las Vegas. That was an adventure.
So was that your first time, and have you? I presume you've been quite regularly since.
Yeah, I think I've been to about 14 of them.
Okay. Very good.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Anyway, I had a good time.
Yeah, nice.
In 2007, I don't remember where I heard about it. It must have been somewhere on IRC. There was this event somebody was putting together called Hackers on a Plane,
Okay.
which was topical because I think this was around the time when Snakes on a Plane came out. And it was funny. So that trip was a package deal that included attendance at DEF CON, plane tickets to Germany for the Chaos Computer Club camp,
Okay.
and then traveled back. And there were, well, I think somewhere between 15 and 20 of us. It's it was actually a really interesting. I don't think it's particularly well known, but that trip kicked off the hackerspace movement in the U.S.
Okay.
Um,
What was the
so
premise of Hackers on a Plane? What was the selling point?
I
Why were
mean,
people doing it?
it was supposed to be kind of a cultural exchange to get some American hackers hanging out with European hackers.
Okay, I see.
And we toured Seabase, which is a Chaos Computer Club hackerspace in I think it's in Berlin.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the goals was, in fact, to try to start a hackerspace movement in the U.S. So Noisebridge in San Francisco came directly out of that. A bunch of other ones did. And there were a number of well-known people like at that on that trip. Notably, Dan Kaminsky was there, and I got sat next to him.
Okay. On the plane?
Uh-huh. Yeah, for a transatlantic flight.
Nice.
And I talked his ear off. And he seemed to love it.
Okay.
And I miss him.
Yeah.
I found out, for anyone who doesn't know, he passed away suddenly, just shy of 2 years ago. But I ended up giving a little speech at his memorial that DEF CON put on for him, and the guy who ran Hackers on a Plane. I went again in 2011 because the hacker camp is every 4 years, and on that one, I found out then that he had put me with Dan on purpose for that trip because Dan had a bit of a reputation for being a party animal, and
Okay.
I managed to be more interesting than partying.
Wow. Good job.
So he stuck me with Dan to keep Dan out of trouble,
Okay.
basically. Um, yeah. I didn't talk much to Dan between 2007 2011, but we'd say hi at conferences. But he started mentoring me, doing introductions when I wanted to get things fixed at companies and couldn't get in through the front door. He would, say, "Oh, hey, talk to this person. I'll introduce you."
Okay.
And I got some things fixed that way, and he gave me advice. And I'll get more into that in a bit.
Sure.
But the startup, I was a sysadmin. They decided they wanted to have full-time start building a security team. And they had me interviewing people. And most of the people I was interviewing just weren't very good. And eventually, they decided to just have me do it.
Okay. So was
Like,
this kind of startup needs a security team because they're growing beyond a size and they need the security, or was it more that this is part of
yeah,
their
yeah,
product?
they had previously had like a consultant who was doing the job part-time.
Got you.
And then they wanted to in-house it and have somebody do it full-time and build out a
Okay.
team. So I was their first full-time security engineer. And I didn't run the team because, oh my goodness, I don't manage people. Um, I I can like get things done with people. Like I
Right.
can people, but like I do not want to be a manager.
Okay.
Um, I, so
Can
I
you
was there for another couple of years doing that.
what sort of thing was it you were doing there in terms of the security? Was it
Operations.
just okay, just keeping their stuff under wraps and
Yeah,
everything?
keeping patches,
Yeah.
like doing incident response,
Yeah.
building monitoring
Okay.
systems, infrastructure, those sorts of things.
So it's kind of a
Um,
almost a specialization of the sysadmin side of things that you were
yeah.
doing.
Running their internal certificate authority.
Okay.
Um, because they had one before I started and it was terrible, so I made it better.
Okay.
Uh,
Fair enough.
yeah. But this is also during this time I was playing capture the flag pretty seriously. I had a team that was based out of San Francisco that I met through the 2600 meetings there. We ended up winning OpenCTF at DEF CON, which is a like you don't have to qualify to play in it.
Okay.
And it's not as hardcore as DEF CON CTF.
Right.
So we played that. We actually won. I think we
Congrats.
won 3 out of 4 years.
Oh wow.
3 out of 4 consecutive years, and the year that
Yeah.
we didn't win, we got second place, narrowly missing first.
Oh, well done either
Yeah,
way. That
yeah.
sounds very impressive.
And like after year 4, they decided the people who ran DEF CON decided that, well, we keep winning this thing, like let's go send us to DEF CON CTF.
Okay.
So we played in DEF CON CTF at DEF CON 20.
Hmm.
And winning was off the table to begin with. Like
Okay.
that was not even something we were even considering trying. Like just that was not going to happen.
Hmm.
But so our goal was pretty modest. We wanted to do better than last place.
Nice.
I think out of 20 teams we got 18th,
Oh, perfect.
and we considered that a win. It's like none of us were very good at binary reversing
Okay.
and writing exploits, but most of us had sysadmin experience, and we put on a hell of a defense.
Right. So
Um,
you're talking about defense here as well as sort of offensive stuff. What was going on?
oh, so it's
What's
an
the way that
attack.
it works? Yeah.
So it's an attack and defend.
Okay.
So they provide you with a number of services that you're supposed to run that have vulnerabilities in them.
Right.
Everybody else is having them, so you need to you need to keep your services running so that they will pass the availability checks,
Right.
and you get points for uptime. You need to defend them from the other team's exploits,
Are we talking firewalls? Are we talking patching and things as well?
whatever you can do.
Okay. Nice.
Um, I whatever you can do. It was I think it was on FreeBSD, which was a little weird because we were all Linux people.
Right.
But it's still Unix, so there's still a lot of things that you can just do generic Unix. Like I had this whole framework I wrote where I shimmed a lot of the system binaries that would be useful post exploitation,
Hmm.
and modified them to just check the origin of where they were being run from, and kick anyone out if
Right.
it looked like they were being used for post-exploitation. And that worked really well.
Okay.
But we couldn't score on anyone else, which was extremely limiting.
Yeah.
It was a good time, though. And we ended up taking over running OpenCTF for a number of years after that. The
Okay. As
first
in
year we
building up
ran
the
it.
challenges and that kind of running.
Uh-huh, yeah.
Yeah.
The first year we ran it, we decided that we would go retro themed.
Okay.
And I think there's still some photos of this floating around on the internet, but we really leaned into it. We ran it on dial-up.
Oh wow.
we brought a dial-up pool to DEF
Okay.
CON.
Awesome.
We ran phone lines to all of the tables, and we told people like
Go and
we
find
had some
yourself a
loaner
modem.
modems.
Okay.
We had some loaner modems,
Yeah.
but yeah. It's funny. Like, how do I hook my iPad up to this modem? I'm like, we're sorry. No. Um,
Awesome.
yeah, and we had challenges that, like, we had challenges that were specifically tuned to the environment. I got a Gopher server
Hmm.
running that had a vulnerability in it from it was like 20 years old, and because of how old it was, nobody released an exploit for it.
Okay.
Like that was just not considered appropriate at the time. So
Right.
I spent hours patching this thing up to make it work on modern Linux. And the challenge was just here's a Gopher server that I made work, exploit it.
Right.
It was some directory traversal thing.
Okay.
Um, oh my goodness, and people struggled with it because what the hell is Gopher?
That
Oh,
sounds like a lot of fun, to be honest.
it was so fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a lot of work, so we only managed to run that competition. I think we did 3 or 4 years, but
Okay.
it was great.
Yeah.
Anyway, jumping back a bit,
Mm.
I got being a cryptography nerd, I could not keep myself away from Bitcoin when that
Okay.
um, started getting even a tiny bit of interest. I think I actually did try to run it way back in 2009. I just could not get the software to run. Revisited it in 2011. Um, Learned how it worked. Just mostly just messed around.
Hmm.
2013, I came across some post about something that something that people were calling brain wallets,
Hmm.
and the idea was that you would deterministically generate a key based on a password.
Right. Or
And
passphrase, wasn't it? It's nice long series of words. Or was that wrong?
I mean, you would hope so.
Okay.
Um, and I decided that I had a half hour each way commute on the train, and I had a laptop with a mobile broadband card, and I wrote a brain wallet cracker to occupy myself during the commute, and then I ran the damn thing.
Hmm.
Um, I got a bunch of phrase dictionaries, like a script Wikipedia, WikiQuote, half a dozen other things,
Hmm.
and I imported the entire Bitcoin blockchain to crack. Because I had learned about Bloom filters and I was going to use them.
Okay.
uh, and the original one I wrote was not particularly fast, but it did work.
Hmm.
And like so I started running this thing and I would, check it every day or so, like, oh, has it found anything? Oh, look, there's a quarter Bitcoin with like I think you are my sunshine, my only sunshine was the passphrase for a
Okay.
quarter of a Bitcoin. to the time
And so,
with anything.
just to clarify, then you've got the passphrase, therefore you have the private key as well. Therefore, you
Yep.
could have that quarter Bitcoin that could be yours. That's kind of
Yes,
position we're in, right?
that is what I could have done.
Yeah.
Um, I did not do that
Okay.
because I have scruples. Like, and I have a disturbing level of scruples, actually. But then I
But the
found,
point is that it's vulnerable to the point where actually you can run your program for a bit and find all of these vulnerable wallets effectively. That's kind of where we're at there, right?
yeah, and then I checked the program, and it reported a balance of 250 bitcoins with passphrase, "How much wood could a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood?"
Oh dear.
And this was tens of thousands of dollars worth of Bitcoin even back then.
Yeah.
And I kind of freaked out, and I called Dan, and I told him that I had found something that I couldn't talk about on the phone, and asked if I could meet up with him
Okay.
because he lived in San Francisco. It was a short trip for me.
Right.
So I'd like go to his place. He was on what was almost certainly an illegal rental above a motorcycle shop.
Right.
And I showed him what I found, and we talked about what to do about it. And then I accidentally stole it.
Accidentally?
Accidentally.
Okay.
So what I did was I sent a small amount of Bitcoin to it and then tried to take it back.
Right.
And I had neglected to think about some of the details of how Bitcoin transactions work. So like I took it back, and then all of the Bitcoin was gone.
Oops. Okay.
And it went to this other address that I didn't recognize, and after a few moments of panic, I realized that like this was just Bitcoin doing its change address things, and so like Dan just told me, okay, I'm gonna go get burritos for us, and this is gonna be fixed when I'm back.
Okay.
And it was.
Nice.
And the burritos were delicious.
Very good.
And 2 years later, he hired me at the company that had just at a company that was originally named Botternaut, that he had started to try to detect man-in-the-browser banking trojans, and utterly failed to sell that to anyone because banks don't like running random JavaScript.
Mm-hmm.
But he figured out he could sell it to advertising companies because they had a huge fraud problem. And so I have been fighting ad fraud ever since.
Very cool. Can you kind of explain what ad fraud is?
Right. So people talk about click fraud,
mm-hmm.
and that is reductive. It's much more complicated than that. Firstly, there's a couple things you have to know about online advertising. One is there's cost per click ads where, well, does what it says on the tin.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's what's called CPM, or cost per mil, which is utterly incomprehensible just from that definition. But what it actually is cost per 1,000 impressions. So basically, it's like you get paid, a couple, like the website gets paid a couple pennies to a fraction of a penny, depending, for each view, and the numbers are so small that they just multiply by 1,000, so you get like $10 per 1,000 impressions
Right. Okay.
is a actually pretty good number. And
Okay. And by impression
that's
again, we're talking about it was on someone's screen at some point. There's nothing more than that.
supposedly was on someone's screen,
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
which is the problem, right?
Okay.
That was what we did, is we would try to figure out if it was in fact on a person's screen, or
Right.
if it was just some automation that did not display it to anyone.
Okay.
Um, and this, we did all manner of utterly bizarre things in JavaScript, like just undefined behavior on purpose every day, all day.
Hmm.
And then I built out network forensics, data collection and processing systems there.
Okay. Are there any
And
stories or techniques you're able to share with us, or is it all quite secretive? And because obviously you're fighting fraud, you don't want to tell
it's
people how to get
very,
around it.
yeah, it's secret sauce,
Yeah. Okay.
largely. The one that I can talk about was the BGP hijacking incidents
Okay.
that we found out 2016. The punchline was, so if you don't know what BGP hijacking is, it's BGP is Border Gateway Protocol. This is the routing protocol that the internet runs on. And I like to joke that the S in BGP stands for security. Of course,
Hmm. Very good.
um, it's purely a, you know, you have to be at least somewhat trusted party to have access to the system. So obviously you're not going to do anything wrong, right?
Hmm.
Unless you get hacked, or if you are not in fact a trustworthy party. Um, so there's not much. There's not really much to stop you from just saying, "Oh, nobody's using these IP addresses; they're mine now."
Okay.
On the internet, and
Right.
that is what these guys did. And we had some back and forth. Like, initially, I was finding these hijackings manually and listing them, and then they started iterating faster. I started automating. Um, Eventually, I built some pretty sophisticated automation that could catch it in near real time.
Okay.
Um, and they had a very sophisticated setup. Like, they they were not only stealing IP addresses, they were also stealing the identity of various companies that had
Mhm.
access to BGP,
Right.
that had abandoned their ID numbers. And then they would try to get IP addresses that matched up,
Okay.
which is very clever. And they would hide this behind a couple of dummy networks to obfuscate it even further. But like, I was able to automate it all anyway.
Mhm.
Um, and then they hijacked IP address space from the U.S. Air Force.
Uh-huh. Very smart.
um, and then they got shut. And then their like BGP hijacking operation was very quickly no more.
It's funny when you get the attention of the right people, isn't it? Or the wrong people, is it maybe? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So
I
what were
mean,
they doing with these IPs that they
oh, they were
grabbed?
running ad fraud from it. Like,
Okay. Okay.
so like, this is an old spammer technique. Like, the
Right.
spammers would just hijack some IPs. The IPs would have a clean reputation because they
I
hadn't been
see.
used for spam, and then they could just go nuts with them until they were burned.
It's amazing,
And
isn't
that's
it?
what these guys
The
were
effort
doing.
that people go into. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I mean, there's also the guys that wrote their own browser basically from scratch in they were using a fork of Node.js called io.js.
Hmm.
This is the one that hit the press. It was called Methbot, um, and turns out that like JavaScript has amazing introspection and reflection feature sets.
Hmm.
So we could just spam like two string calls against every object that was available because they would run our JavaScript code.
Yeah.
So we just we found the thing because they like accidentally ran a denial of service attack on our servers
Okay.
due to a bug. The bug was they would send HTTP post requests to us, HTTP requests with a body,
Hmm.
and those requests have to say how long the data payload is, and they calculated that by looking at the string length,
Hmm.
which is not the number of bytes if there's any non-ASCII characters in
Yeah.
there.
Unicode and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, so like anytime there was Unicode, like our servers would just start throwing like, what the hell is this garbage method you were telling me about? Like, I cannot run this. Um, and I think they had stolen a bunch of IP addresses through forgery, and they had them registered to like they had the registration data set up so that it said that they were like major US ISPs. So like
Hmm.
you look up in Whois and it's like, oh, it's Comcast. That's a legitimate American ISP. This is probably fine. But they were just running it in a data center in Dallas, Texas. Um, and like there is they were making stupid amounts of money. Their hosting bill,
Yeah.
my best estimate was that they were paying $250,000 a month in hosting costs,
Wow. Okay.
and making a significant multiple of that in
Yeah,
profit.
definitely. It's amazing that the stuff that people go into for this kind of thing,
Yeah.
the
Anyway,
effort behind it.
the
Yeah.
guys behind it are in jail now.
There you go. Don't do it. And as Graham says as well, Graham sent a message. Don't. Apparently, they were unaware of the phrase "Do not poke the bear." Yeah.
Yeah.
Leave it to
Well,
sleep.
I mean, they just they were done for when they made our sysadmins mad.
Yeah, yeah. So tell me,
Like,
if you're running a service, I guess this kind of service as well, where you're doing all this fraud detection, you need really good real-time insight into what is happening. Is that the only way you sort of stumbled across these people, or is there something else that was happening? Or is it something you can't talk about again?
look for weird stuff, figure out which of the weird stuff has a benign explanation and which doesn't, and
Yeah.
dig into the stuff that doesn't.
So does that mean
Um,
that it's someone's job effectively to sit in front of logs and whatever else it might be to just poke at things and see what makes
that's what I
sense, what
did.
doesn't? Yeah.
That was a large part of my job.
Okay. Awesome.
Um, yeah, I can. There's a disturbing amount of stuff that I can mentally parse hex dumps from.
Oh no.
Um, yeah. Oh, there's the PCAP. Okay. I don't see the hex anymore. I see Chrome, Bot, Firefox, Internet Explorer.
Oh dear. Very
Oh,
good.
it's terrible. I'm pretty sure I could have used those neurons for something better.
Never mind.
Like that is a job that my brain does that's much more easily and efficiently done by a computer, but
Mhm.
I stared too long into the abyss.
Right. Fair enough. Very
Ah,
good. So I guess that kind of brings us roughly up to date. You're now working
yeah.
somewhere, but undisclosed, and we're not talking about that today.
Yes, I now work as a principal security engineer at an undisclosed
Fair enough.
business.
Yeah, very good.
Um, yeah, I yeah, after Dan died, I kind of lost motivation to work at the company that he started.
Hmm.
which seems like a reasonable thing to happen. So I, yeah, my heart wasn't in it. I ended up resigning
Yeah.
and took a 6-month break from employment.
Okay. Fair enough. And
And
well done
now
for
I'm,
realizing and doing that as well. It's sometimes difficult to do.
yeah, well, I mean, I figured I could resign and keep some dignity, or I could be performance managed.
Right.
And I do like having some dignity.
Fair enough. Cool. So
Yeah.
should we talk about some projects? I think you've
Yeah.
got something in particular to show us today.
Yeah. So Wi-Fi,
Yeah.
which I have repeatedly claimed to despise, um, but I my partner and I bought a house a while back that is being remodeled and is still not ready, and I decided that we were going to wire the place and then put ceiling mounted access points in.
Mhm.
And so I spent some time researching options for ceiling mounted access points because I wanted something where I could plausibly run OpenWRT,
Okay.
which way back when, the WRT in OpenWRT comes from the Linksys WRT54G,
There you go.
which was the original platform that it ran on.
Yeah.
Many years ago. So I ended up going with some equipment from a company called Ingenious, also known as Cineo in some markets, which was also the vendor that made the radio cards that I built access points out of at the ISP I worked at.
Okay.
Um, and I had previously had one of their products, and it had a undocumented feature that would just drop you into a root shell,
Right.
which was useful.
Uh-huh.
Um, they removed that from their newer hardware, but well, I reverse engineered their firmware.
Very good.
So I have like depending on when you count, I have like 3 O days for the thing. None of which are secret. I think I've posted about all of them.
Right.
One like if you put a serial console on it, and if you let me switch here, I
Please
have
do, yeah.
I can remember how to use OBS. This will work.
There we go.
Actually, no, I'm going to use. This is my keyboard that allows me to type without pain.
Very nice.
So that is a focus isn't great. That's a TTL level serial port.
Is that in the top right corner? Or not corner, but edge? Over there? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So there's actually, I have two models of these. This is the one with the external antennas, and then there's this one that has this built-in antenna. I have no idea how this antenna functions. Like this looks really weird to me as an antenna, but apparently it works. And I wanted to break out the serial ports in a way where I could use it without having to open the case.
Mhm.
So I built this this cursed thing, which
Okay.
is USB on one end and a 2.5 millimeter tip ring sleeve connector, often used for audio.
Mhm.
And then the serial let's get the pin header soldered on here, and then cable, which goes to this jack in the case. And then on the other side, we have
Very good.
yeah, so that is a serial port, and the case goes on just fine with that. And I've got you can't see any of it, but like here's this other one.
Same again over there. Neat.
Yeah, I
And so
actually just did.
is this to support sort of reverse engineering to in the first instance, and then adding support for OpenWRT in the second?
It's actually officially supported by OpenWRT.
Okay.
With apparent blessing of the company.
Oh wow, brilliant.
Yeah, I mean they kind of like it's GPL, so like their own firmware is a modified version of OpenWRT, so they kind of have to.
Right.
Anyway, but there's a bunch of stuff I don't. Well, the standard builds of the firmware have some limitations that I don't like. Some of the defaults are really annoying for my purposes, especially when like OpenWRT is focused on use as a wireless router, not access points,
Right.
and as such makes a lot of assumptions that even in firmware builds that are for access points still cater to the router use case.
Okay.
So in particular, like by default, these comes up with a fixed static IP address.
Okay.
So I made a modified build of the firmware that uses DHCP.
Do you mind if we see your face again?
Is my face not showing up on the?
We're currently seeing your.
I failed to hit OK.
There you go.
I failed to hit OK.
Cool. Thank you. So yeah, no, that sounds good. I was going to ask at one point what the benefits were to OpenWRT versus their stock firmware, and I guess in one part it's just sort of the control over it. Is there anything else in particular you're going for?
I might get better performance. The vendor firmware is on a I think it's 3.14 is the kernel. So right. This is one this is one that I actually just installed the serial port on 2 or 3 hours ago.
Okay.
So we're gonna see if it works.
Ooh, a live demo.
Yeah. Risky. Oh, it's fine. It probably won't catch fire. Okay, and then we would plug in the plug in.
That's PoE, I presume. There you go.
Oh, wow. Look at that.
Magic.
Yep. There we go.
Oh. Neat.
Not knock my screwdrivers off the desk. Like, I'm sure it'll be fine if I set it down on it sometime.
That's got a lot of options in the early bootloader there.
Yes, so this is the vendor. This is the vendor firmware. I think. Oh, my console's a little bit sad.
Oh, never mind.
Okay, so we can boot this into the vendor firmware. Yeah, there we go. Linux 3.14. OpenWRT has a 5.10 kernel.
Right.
The vendor firmware I cannot get to run in UK regulatory mode,
Okay.
which is annoying because the channels that require radar detection do not work when the AP thinks it's running in the US. But they work fine in European regulatory domains. But the vendor firmware does not let you select UK. And it turns out neither does OpenWRT.
Okay. Is this maybe a driver or firmware issue on the Wi-Fi part?
The official builds of OpenWRT respect the settings in the EEPROM.
Right. Okay.
Or the EEPROM. So it has a selection of countries, but they're all basically North America.
Right. Okay. Frustrating.
I did figure out. Well, I was able to. So there's a pretty general exploit that works on most OpenWRT based firmwares. OpenWRT has a configuration backup feature. Those configuration backups are a tarball of some files. When you restore that configuration, the way that is done is it untars those files to the root directory.
Oh, no. Okay.
So I can just drop my own binaries in the config file backup and then upload it. I have a tool that's up on GitHub that I call infringement, which just has a jailbreak command for these things, which should work for I think most models from this vendor, and that's infringement spelled with EN.
Okay.
Okay. Next we have this thing. Oh my goodness, I shouldn't have used putty. Anyway, so there's a password prompt here.
Right.
I just ran strings on the login binary.
Oh, right. Okay. Busy box for the win. There you go.
There's a shell.
Yeah.
There's a root shell. And also that this is not the model that this is.
Right.
Right. So this is the vendor firmware. Unfortunately, newer versions of OpenWRT no longer include cocktail recipes.
Very cool. So I guess in terms of your next steps for that project, it's going to be getting a newer OpenWRT build, loading it in.
That's not the next step. It's TFTP booted.
Uh-huh.
I can't type, apparently.
I wonder what's going on with you.
It's because I had bad insomnia last night and only slept like 3 hours. Okay. So I have a TFTP server running on my router, which is in fact just a Linux machine running Debian because... I need to fix that. We'll take... Actually, I think there's a stupid, simpler way. So there's, I guess this is using a slightly different, this is using a different identifier to the other one I have. And I just need to copy the file. Well,
sure.
1 second, I'm going to do this off screen on my laptop. I have no idea how it generates that file name, to be honest.
Is it not the MAC address? It
No, that
doesn't
is
look like
not
a
the
MAC
MAC
address.
address. No, it is not a MAC address. I don't know what it is.
Hmm.
And it also doesn't seem to be the product ID. Anyway.
That's better. Maybe it's a serial number or something. I don't know.
It is also not the serial number.
Okay. Okay. I'm out of ideas.
Yeah. So now we have OpenWRT.
So this is one of your builds,
This is
510 kernel.
yeah, this is my build.
Nice. Awesome.
So I have the fancier version of host APD on here that has all of the features. I got WireGuard on here. I wrote a kernel patch for the Wi-Fi card to allow the country code to be overridden. I think.
You mentioned WireGuard. Is that as in the VPN?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I wanted to have it on there just for encrypting the local link. Because I have I did some work on I have code in libpcap now.
Okay.
In fact, libpcap has this thing called rpcapd, which is a remote packet capture daemon, and so I have that running on here. But the TLS in it is just a terrible mess. The authentication is a terrible mess.
Right.
But I've been using it. I've been experimenting with using it to capture beacon frames from some Amazon Dash buttons that I picked up on eBay and hacked by playing audio files at.
What?
Yes.
I might need to look into
it's
that.
amazing. Yeah. Yeah, so Amazon dropped support for them, but they had one of the ways to configure them was through
Beeping
audio. So yeah, you play some beeping at it, and it does a buffer overflow and overwrites the thing, and then you can then configure it. It'll then come up as a Wi-Fi access point. You can specify an SSID, and it'll try to connect, and you can use a packet capture with these radios to put monitor modes. So you can capture the beacon frames and route that into a system somewhere and take actions based on it.
Okay. Neat.
And this doesn't even bother prompting me for a password. I keep forgetting whether it's get reg or reg get. Nope.
Probably not that one. Very cool.
You can see it's country code
GB.
Great Britain. We have DFS, which is, I think it stands for dynamic frequency selection. That's the radar coexistence thing. And then I have all of the UK channels unlocked, including channels 12 and 13 on the 2.4 gigahertz band. All of which are completely legitimate to use in the UK, to be clear. And
is that genuinely 60, 70 gigahertz down the bottom there?
That is not supported by the radio, but that's those are allowed frequencies. I think. Yeah, so there's 60 gigahertz band Wi-Fi now or something like that.
Yeah. Cool. Very good.
I think it still doesn't populate MAC addresses correctly.
Right, okay.
Like this is bullshit. I was trying to fix this, and I have yet to succeed.
Right.
Like all of these MAC addresses are just garbage.
Need to figure out where they come from, I guess. That's probably a
Oh, I know where
bit
they
of
come from.
okay, bit of
I know
spacing.
where they come. Yeah.
Anyway, I'll leave you to
This
it.
one's actually worse than the other one, but yeah. So I get to I get custom software on here. Like it automatically removes all the firewall rules when it comes up for the first time. It comes up on DHCP instead of having a static IP that I have to faff about to get connected to. And it actually worked. Like the serial port worked the first time I tried it, which is kind of amazing.
Awesome. It's a nice one.
It wasn't the first. It wasn't the first one I modified. Though.
Okay, had a trial run with this another one before.
Yeah, the other one didn't work the first time.
Okay, got you. Well.
Yeah, it's actually really annoying to solder the connector on because it's just it's radio equipment, so it has a massive copper ground plane. And you have to crank the heat way up on the soldering iron to get to actually get a proper solder joint.
Yeah. Oh well. Well done, either way. Yeah. Glad you're making good progress on that.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I think we're probably right about ready to wrap up. Is there anything else you'd like to mention or talk about before we say goodbye? Okay.
No, it's been great talking to you.
Yeah, thanks very much for coming along.
It's fun.
We've been trying to do this for a while, so thank you.
Yeah. I got sent on a business trip last minute the last time we were going to do this.
Yeah. No worries.
And then I was in the States for like 2.5 months.
Yeah. Never mind.
But I'm back. All good.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for spending the evening with us. Next week we're going to be talking with Matt Campbell, but otherwise it's goodbye from us. Okay. Bye, everybody.